Hello learners, this is Dr. Amit Ahuja, Assistant Professor from University School of Education, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, Delhi. Today we are going to reflect upon the process or the inquiry approach in science. Any methodology or an approach of teaching depends upon the objectives of the lesson, needs of the learner and nature of content in hand. First of all, it is essential to look upon objectives of science teaching, and as per National Policy of Education 1986, the objectives of science teaching are developing the spirit of inquiry among the learners. Yes, the spirit of inquiry generates a spirit of motivation among them, in fact. Otherwise, there is no use of conducting any kind of activities in sciences. Things begin with what, why, how of a phenomena. For example, if a bulb blew out in a class, the student may ask, what happened? How does it happen? Why it happened? So all these three, what, why and how of that process may lead to spirit of inquiry among them, and they may move ahead, however under the guidance of a teacher. Another thing is developing objectivity among the students. They should avoid subjectivity. They should focus on objectivity. The difference between objectivity and subjectivity is that sun is a star. It's an objectivity. It's a scientific fact. But sun is an angel, and people of certain faith offer holy water to that. So it becomes a matter of subjectivity. Objectivity means universal acceptance of a thing. Third thing is that there must be courage to question among the learners. Courage to question doesn't mean that they should come out of the way or they should show some kind of aggression. No, they should be able to ask, they should be able to think. And during this thinking process, confusion is the first step. Yes, without confusion, the learner may not be motivated to go ahead. So courage to question begins from confusion, but that confusion must be resolved by the teacher. If it's a question, then a relevant answer must be there. If it's a query, then it must be conducted, organized to find out the facts. Another objective of science teaching is problem solving. Problem solving is the highest form of a learning. If there is a problem, there must be a solution. Problem means anything that disturbs you is a problem. Solution means solution is a state in which the problem does not exist anymore. If it exists anymore, then at least it cannot be regarded a solution. Problem solving is a process. Actually, it's a way or the means of arriving at a state, that is solution, in which a problem does not exist. But the problem should be motivating enough so that students are perturbed to find out its solution. Decision making. You should have a definite stand and a vision. It should not be diverted in nature. So decision making means arriving at a definite conclusion and holding it firmly. Investigating, that is exploring. For example, I previously posed the situation, the bulb blew out and the students asked, what happened? How did it happen? Why did it happen? So we need to conduct an inquiry. If I am interested, what happened? So I need to investigate on that line of action. What happened? Okay, bulb has blown out. How did it happen? I switched it on, immediately bursted. Okay, why did it happen? When it bursted, some sound was experienced. So that means, is there some gas in the bulb? Yes or no? Is there some vacuum in the bulb? Yes or no? Now, if the teacher is there, he will say there is no gas, but there is a vacuum. Let us explore this. Then it becomes a perfect part of an investigation. So this is an example of conducting an investigation. Developing scientific attitude. Scientific attitude means how do you view the world. You see, there must be difference between scientific attitude and scientific aptitude. In competitions, professional competitions, we gauge the aptitude. Aptitude means mental disposition of something. That is, something is cognitive. But attitude means how do you view, How do you develop that outlook towards the world? So, ultimately that is aptitude that helps us in developing attitude. So, attitude is a kind of resultant that develops because of an aptitude. So, in competitions, since there is lack of time, it is advisable to gauge aptitude. Using scientific method, yes, become logical and systematize in exploring the things in hand. Don't be haphazard, be organized, be cohesive. Reducing all sorts of prejudices based on sex, caste, religion, language, etc. That is, we must be secular enough in conducting our activities. That is, things should not be viewed from a particular perspective. After discussing the objectives of science, let us discuss process approach. That is, what is the nature of science ultimately? Science is not just content. It's just not merely a body of information, a collection of laws, principles, etc. It's content plus something, and that something is process. For example, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. This is a content, but the apparatus needed to verify that, like setting up of porcelain and using thermometer, etc., then using a burner, and then measuring, recording and finding and arriving at a conclusion, yes, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius is process, and that is that something. So, science is a body of knowledge as well as a way of arriving at that body of knowledge, and that is a very crucial part of science, that is process. Processes of science are those skills and techniques which are used by the scientists and students who work like scientists for the moment in schools as they study and do research work in science. Yes, process approach definitely is predominantly followed by the scientists, but the students also, since they are mini scientists in school system, they also follow that. So, there should not be difference between the two. Process approach requires more time consuming, but as a consequence of this, teaching learning becomes effective, instrumental enough, interesting, long lasting and joyful. Otherwise, there is no difference between the teaching of sciences and rest of the disciplines. These are the experiments, observations, carrying out practicals, conducting activities that distinguishes science from rest of the disciplines. Process approach, in fact, it is an activity based science teaching method. Initially, I have said that a teaching methodology depends upon the objectives of the lesson, nature of the content and needs of the learner. Process approach is an activity based, but that activity is conducted by the student, not by the teacher. However, in a supervisory way, teacher stands there. Process approach refers to learning science concepts using processes of science. For example, if I said water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, what happens when certain substances are dissolved in water to its boiling and freezing temperature? Let us see. So, whatever conclusion we arrive at or we derive, that must be probed through some processes, that is some approaches using certain practical acts, etc. Only then we should be able to arrive at that one. The different processes in science as per their hierarchy are observing. Observing is best carried out by using all our senses, but predominantly we use our eyes. So, for example, if I note something because of its odor, smell, then I may discriminate this. For example, these are the chemical which have pleasant odor, others do not have, others have pungent odor. So, I may classify them and later on I may arrive at some inference. So, observing has been in this context been conducted by our nose as a sense. By in our skin or by anything else, by another sense, we can also conduct this. Classifying means placing the things or the data or the matter under consideration in different classes with respect to certain parameters or features. That ordering must be definite and must be rationalistic and must be based on some characteristics. So, it is a definite way of arriving at some conclusion. For example, these are the substances that are soluble in water, these are the substances that are not soluble in water. For example, the substances that are soluble in water may be having dielectric constant equivalent to water, may be having bonding like water. So, that is why they are soluble in water, and also it confirms the principle that like dissolves like, and water is a universal solvent. But what about those that are not soluble in water? That these are the substances which have very low dielectric constant or may differ from them from the water in terms of its bonding, etc. So, this example proved that how can we use classification as a process. Using numbers in measuring, in predicting, in inferring, in arriving at a conclusion is also a process approach. Measuring, that is bringing some things in measurable form so that we can conduct and act on that in the form of an activity. Using space-time relationship is another process approach in which we use these two variables in a cohesive manner, that is space as well as time. Communicating, that is how do we discuss, interact with others, negotiate with others, object with others, convince others. Because science doesn't mean that the things are absolute. For example, sky is blue unless and until anyone does not prove that sky is not blue. So, sky is blue until till that moment when some person proves that sky is not blue. So, things are not absolute in sciences. Knowledge is not absolute in science. So, that requires the learner must be in an open-minded state, that must be able to accept that his ideas have been rejected by others, are not in conformity with others, and at the same time he must be able to convince others about the correctness of his thoughts. So, that comes under communication, that is, am I able to communicate my ideas with others? So, language in that domain is a very imperative tool, and we must remember that language for any discipline like mathematics, sciences, social science, and of course, for language, naturally language is a powerful tool that must be used judiciously so that our learners are able to communicate what they are intending. Then predicting. Yes, predicting with some intelligence, with some rationale. It doesn't mean guessing, just guessing, mere guessing, because it distorts the spirit of nature of inquiry. Yes, prediction must be rationalistic in one, it must be close to close to the precision or the exact reality. Inferring means, is the learner able to deduce the consequences? For example, oxygen as an element supports combustion, first. Second, water is a compound that contains oxygen as an element support combustion, but water that contains oxygen extinguishes the fire. Why? The conclusion may be drawn that oxygen is an element, it supports combustion, but water, that is a compound, and since elements lose their property when they become part of compound, however they combine in definite ratio, they lose their properties. So, oxygen that had the property of supporting burning combustion loses because it underwent interaction with hydrogen. So, it is no more capable of supporting the combustion, but in turn it changes property by combining with water, oxygen, and forming water, that is now it is capable of extinguishing the fire. Air on the other side is a mixture of gases and has oxygen supports combustion because air is a mixture of gases, and in gases elements retain their properties. Hence, oxygen as an element supports the combustion, but oxygen by being a part of air as a mixture supports the combustion. So, that is the inference that has been drawn by the learner if we pose these much situations. So, it is a process, it is a powerful process. Defining operationally. Yes, are we able to define the things in an operational term? For example, what do I mean by this if I am using this in my course of action? For example, again come to the universal solvent water. Water is a compound in the context of states of matter, but it is a covalent compound in the context of chemical bonding. So, in what sense I am using the word water in my text or my discussion, I must define it operationally. Then formulating hypothesis. Yes, hypothesis, look at the spelling SES. If it is SIS, then it is singular, SES means it is plural. Formulating hypothesis means are the learners able to formulate the hypothesis intelligent guess, but that guessing must be based on some past experiences, evidences, or other related work also. Interpreting data. Are you able to interpret the data? That is, can the data be subjected to interpretation? That is, if the data is ambiguous, incomplete, or not related to the situation under consideration, then it cannot be interpreted and it is of no use. The biggest drawback with the data is that if it is not used. Data, information, knowledge, all these things stand valid if they are utilized. Controlling the variables. Variables are the entities that are able to vary. Parameters reflect the current status of a phenomena. We focus upon variables only. Are the learners or the students able to control the variables under the situation? That is, are they able to perform or they able to even think of conducting a control experiment in a given situation? And the last is experimenting. Yes, experiment, practical and activities form an inherent part of sciences. In an experiment, the learner moves from known to unknown. In practical, the learner moves from known to known. Activity means it's a sequence of acts. For example, in experiment, I need to verify I am in a known state, but I need to move in an unknown state. For example, to determine the 2 anion, 2 cations in a given salt, to determine the strength of a given solution, etc. by means of titration, then it becomes experimentation. But if a learner is asked to show that the length of a conductor is directly proportional to its resistance, let us verify, or voltage is directly proportional to current, then let us verify. So, all these aspects come under the domain of practicals. So, learners, process approach is one of the most powerful approach that strengthens the nature of science in itself own, because science is content plus something, and that something comprises the means of arriving at that body of knowledge, and process approach in itself offers a number of processes that we have discussed so far that facilitate learner to adopt, work out with that and arrive at that conclusion. Thanks.